I'm Jill Becker. That's my maiden name and my only name ever. Born in Buffalo, New York. That's where my extended family is from, and many of them still live there. But my parents moved to Rochester, and then I lived there till I went to college, and then I've lived in lots of different places. I was born New Year's Eve, 1949. So, I think it's kind of an odd birthday. And of my birthdays, the one when I turned 60, I made a big deal out of. I felt like that was kind of going over a hump. And I was part of Nonstop at the time, Nonstop Antioch. And the gang gave me this big party. It was also a New Year's Eve party, but I felt well celebrated. And so I'm 74. I am a baby boomer, definitely. I'm the second of 5 kids born right after World War II. My mother's maiden name was June Louise Hurst. She was born February 11th, 1923. And
where?
Buffalo, also. Both parents were from Buffalo, and both were German-Irish. But they were kind of from different sides of the tracks. Like my father was middle class and my mother was poor.
June Hurst. How do you spell her last name?
H-U-R-S-T, Hurst. So June's mother was alive till I was 10, Pearl. I have pictures of Pearl, and I have some pictures that I don't know who's who, so that problem. But I knew my grandmother, because she didn't die she died when I was 10. She died in 1960, at the age of 60. But I knew her. She was kind. She was very chuckly. She laughed a lot. And she lived in Buffalo, and we lived in Rochester. So when we visited her, or when she visited us, or we'd meet at the beach or something, it was just hanging out. She was like a beautiful little child of a singing family that traveled as the entertainment on Lake Erie. So I think Holbrook was the singing family, because it was her family as a child. So they weren't the Hursts. But she wound up having a strong relationship with her absent husband's father, who lived with my mother and the kids. So the father split, but the grandfather stayed. So my mother was kind of raised by her mother and her father's father. Pearl is my grandmother, so she's June's mother. Pearl was kind of this beautiful little child who got so much attention and pampering and wasn't tough at all. And then she married this guy who was kind of bad, Robert Hurst. And he and my grandmother had a wallpaper hanging business together. That was their daily bread. Robert was June's dad, Robert Hurst. And then she had one brother named Bobby, too, and then 2 sisters.
And what was your dad's name?
Richard Becker. And both of my parents became way more educated than the other people in their families. Like my mother was the only one who graduated from high school, and she went to nursing school. And my dad was the only one who went to college, and then he also got a master's in chemistry, so he was a research chemist.
What year was Dad born, Richard?
Richard was born in 1922. As he would say, 1/21/22. And he worked on the color magenta in color film for Kodak. So they moved to Rochester when they were in their 20s, and they moved there because he got a job at Kodak. So Kodak was still working on film, of course. It was before digital. And so he was a researcher trying to get better quality color in color film. So Richard's parents were Margaret and Ernie. And Margaret, for some reason, I think because her mother's name was also Margaret, she went by Lucy. And Ernie was, his father Ernest was a haberdasher. He had a men's hat store until the Depression. And then he lost the store, and he wound up selling women's dresses door to door for the competitor. So it must have been galling. You know, I've seen pictures of him. Actually, I saw a picture of my grandfather modeling a men's suit. And that was interesting. I mean, he looks very dapper, yeah. And then my father, he became more of a social justice warrior in a way as life went on. And he felt like, how can I be spending all my time perfecting color film when there's so much work that needs to be done? So he felt like it was not a noble cause in a way. And at the time, Kodak started to work on getting better results from tests, emergency test results, like for the emergency room in hospitals. So the last 3 years he worked with trying to get quick results on blood tests, but he felt like the day-to-day of his life was still the same. It was in the lab, it was doing experiments, and he felt like it still didn't fulfill what he hoped for. And I think he was kind of bored. Like, I think he was somebody who wanted to play. He wanted to act, he wanted to take piano lessons, he took up sewing. So he retired as soon as he could when he was 59 from working at Kodak. And then started to do amateur acting. He just started to play. You know, I felt like he needed to be playing more, probably his whole life. But they were very involved in our church, and the church became involved in social justice in the 60s. And then two of my brothers started an organization in the basement of the church called Youth Against War and Fascism. And then they kind of pulled my parents along. So my parents became increasingly political and liberal, heading toward radical as they aged. And at that time, like in 1964, Saul Alinsky came to Rochester and tried to develop job trainings for black men specifically. And my father was very supportive of it, but a lot of people weren't. So he would write letters to the editor, and they'd say, how can you accept a paycheck from Kodak and then speak against them? And my mother said, he's not accepting a paycheck, he's getting paid. You know, that like how he thinks as a person has nothing to do with the fact that he's earning a living at this company. So yeah, they shifted way to the left as time went on.
And tell us a little bit about June.
June was a nurse at first, and then she was a stay-at-home mom with 5 kids. And then she went back to nursing when the kids were older. She was a nurse in an inner-city daycare for quite a few years. My older brother is Richard.
Oh, so there's a junior.
Richard Jr., sort of. Richard. And then I'm second, and then my brother Brian, Neil, and Christopher. One strong memory I have is walking to school with my older brother, and I think it was about a mile away, and we had to go over a railroad bridge to get to school, but we liked to go under the railroad bridge and skip over the tracks, but it was a working train. So one time I was behind my brother and the train was coming, and my brother saw that it was coming and like yanked me over the tracks. And it was ridiculously dangerous, actually. And then somehow, maybe it was me who told my parents what happened. And recently I brought it up to my brother, do you remember that? And he said, yeah, our parents were not happy. Very understated. The big important thing for me was when I was about in 8th grade, 7th grade maybe, I wanted to dance. So I looked in the yellow pages and I went and visited each dance teacher in Rochester to see where I should go to study. And I found a woman, Fanny Kronman, she seemed quite elderly at the time. She was probably 60, and she taught dance in a long skirt, and she taught in a real traditional modern dance, very serious modern dance style. It was in the ballroom of a hotel right downtown. like an old classical ballroom with a chandelier and a grand piano. And she would do the kind of thing like open up the piano and go in with her drumstick, and she'd say, "Terror!" And we would all like run out and throw ourselves on the floor. It was real old school. What I now realize was, I mean, it wasn't that old at the time, but it was traditional modern dance coming out of the 30s and 40s. Martha Graham, Humphrey Weidman, Jose Limon, these real traditional techniques. And a lot of the places were teaching like the can-can and, dancing with feather boas and stuff like that. And she was very serious, which I loved. Once we moved to the suburb, I went to Irondequoit High School. It was a northern suburb, so it was right on Lake Ontario. Yeah. The whole school was 2,000. So it was pretty big high school. And we went to one school through 4th grade, then another 5th through 8th, and then everybody came together for high school.
Helped shape you.
I didn't love high school, but I loved going downtown and taking my dance classes. So, but then my senior year in high school, there was a ballet teacher who put an ad in the paper for people to audition for his company, it was 1 year of rehearsal and one performance, and anybody who auditioned, he took them in, and he gave us free dance classes, free ballet classes 3 times a week, and then rehearsals on the weekends. So he was just a total hippie ballet teacher, and we would bring him loaves of bread and stuff. Like a barter, we'd give him things, but he said, "It's enough for me just to smell it." He was such a hippie, but he was also a very fine ballet teacher. So his name was Tom Cahill. Tom Cahill. I'd be surprised if he's still alive. I mean, he was probably only 30 or so when he taught us, but he was just really inclusive and specific. He was a very clear teacher. So I always liked to dance. Like I would make up my own dances and do them on my porch. And I always liked to dance. I don't know why. But my brothers didn't. I was the only one in the group that went into any of the arts. Like 2 of my brothers are full-time political activists with the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And then my next brother had his own auto mechanic Volvo shop in Raleigh-Durham, and then my baby brother became a chemist like my father, and then worked in industry for a while, but then became a high school teacher. That's what he really wanted to do. I went to college nearby in Brockport, which was just 45 minutes away, and there I got to see a lot more professional companies. And I saw a few in high school. Actually, when I was 15, I saw Alvin Ailey. He came to Rochester, and he had just made Revelations. I thought he had just made it, but maybe he had made it a couple years earlier, but it was very fresh. And that's actually was my turning point, because I saw that company and I said, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to be a dancer. So that was like extremely inspiring. So Fanny Cronman, my teacher in Rochester, was friends with the head of the dance program at Brockport. And I think that's how I knew to get on the bus and go to Brockport and see the company. So Revelations was kind of like a Black history told with beautiful costumes.
Sorry, turn it off. Go ahead.
Okay.
Turn this off.
Yeah. So Revelations was just like a celebration of Black life, I would say. And in some ways mournful of bad things in Black life. So it was, did you ever see it? Oh, it's a really broad history, and the dancers were amazing. And because I think the piece was so new, I'm pretty sure it's still being performed, even though that was 1965 when I saw it. But it was such a masterpiece, and it was so historical and gutsy and high-powered, and the dancers were amazing. So Fanny was the beginning, and then Tom Cahill, and then college. When I went to college, they had a dance program, but it was the New York State schools, and they develop much. And then that college, Brockport, was selected as the place for dance. So the second year, they brought in a dance company of 7 professional teachers. So the first year, I only had 2 teachers. One of whom was very elderly. And so it was kind of a light program when I started, but it was the only state school where you could major in dance. And then the second year, this dance company from Ohio State came, and their whole company became our teachers. And then the third year, another guy, Richard Bull, came, and he was an improviser. So the second year, we got a lot of good, strong technique, and the third year, we got more of an improvisational thrust. So when I started, we were 7 dance majors. When I graduated, there were 150 dance majors. So it was a period of exponential growth. And I became tight friends with a group of people. We all liked to improvise, and we met on Sundays and brought food, and we'd dance for 3 hours, and then we'd all put things into a big salad. And at the end of college, 9 of us decided to stay together as a dance company in San Francisco.
So you moved to San Francisco?
Yeah. So one of them had a contact at a place called Project Artaud, and it had been an industrial building, and they had there were these huge spaces, and a bunch of us stayed for a while. 5 of us lived in this 1,000 square foot room, and we sanded off a part of the floor in the central area and made it into a studio and a performance space, and we gave performances and classes for about 9 months. And then things kind of fell apart. And a friend of mine, Lois, while out there, I met the person who became my first husband, and then my friend Lois. And Lois and I saw a dance performance there by Steve Paxton, who was doing contact improvisation. And we were very taken with it. And Lois knew him. She wrote to him and said, "Can we come and study with you?" And he was on the faculty at Bennington College in Vermont. And he said, "Well, you can't study with me because you're not a college student here, but you can," and we had graduated from college, "but you can come, and there's so many people doing contact here."
What's that?
So contact is a duet form of improvisation that has to do with weight sharing between 2 people. So it looks almost like cooperative wrestling, where you were not trying to win, you were just trying to see where does the movement go. So it's a lot of just the physics of 2 bodies. And it sounds kind of intimate, but it's not intimate at all. Like, people do it all over the world, and you kind of know, if you're a good contact improviser, you know how to go with the flow with another person, how to support them, how to protect yourself, how to fall and roll and rebound and fly up in the air. And it's very fun anyways. And so Ira, my first husband, Ira Bruckner, Ira, and Lois Welk, and we hitchhiked from San Francisco to Vancouver, and then took the train across Canada, spent a little time with our parents, mine in Rochester, hers in Buffalo. Then we continued our journey to Bennington, Vermont, where Lois knew someone who had a farmhouse that had 2 extra bedrooms. So we lived there and studied with Steve Paxton and mostly with his students, and just sort of, we made money cleaning houses and danced. And then at the end of that summer, I got a job.
What year was that?
That was, I graduated from college in 72, and so this was the end of the summer of 73. Then I got a job in Albany. I had gone to Albany State for 1 semester of college and knew the dance teacher there, and she needed someone to be an adjunct teacher. And so she hired me. So I spent 1 year in Albany teaching, very light teaching schedule. And then at the end of that time, I rejoined Lois and these 2 other dancers, Bill T. Jones and Arnie Zane. And the 4 of us started a dance company in Binghamton, New York. And there, Bill and Arnie had gone to college there, and they knew of a space that we could occupy. So again, we renovated a space. And I worked with them for a year, and then Ira didn't like living there. And so we moved, and then I got a teaching assistantship to go to graduate school in Washington, D.C. at American University. So I went to D.C. and got a master's in dance, and taught a lot. I was there for 2 years, and then Ira really wanted to go to New York. He was a poet and a painter, but at that time he was a poet, and he wanted to hear the music in New York. So we went to New York, and we wound up living there from 1977 to to 89, but with a couple years off, where in 1984, I got a job as a substitute teacher for somebody for 4 months in Dusseldorf in Germany. But I have to back up, actually, because when I first moved to New York, I created work with 2 other dancers and choreographers. So we had a trio that was all about creating dances. And then in 1980, I started my own dance company. And I had that from 80 to 84, and then I got this job in Dusseldorf. And just before I went, I had assembled a program of solo dances from my group company work. So I was making like 3 concerts a year. I was just like bursting with dances. And
What's the name of your dance company?
Jill Becker and Dancers, Inc. That's what everybody did in those days. But I had made a program of solos to do in art galleries in New York. And so when I got the substitute teaching job in Dusseldorf, I had that whole evening of solos in my pocket. And so I did that in Dusseldorf, and there was a young woman there who started to have a management company for music, theater, and dance groups. So she took me on. I was one of her first clients, and she wound up getting me performances for the next 11 years. So it was a long period of time. And she was getting me a lot of work in the late 80s. So I wound up getting a job in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, at a dance studio Monday through Thursday, and then on the weekends I would go and do my one-woman show either in Germany or in Holland. So she had contacts in both places. I have auditioned for a few things, but mostly what I like and what I think my gift is making dances. So I never really wanted to be a dancer in other people's work, and I have done it, but it's usually kind of frustrating to me because I want to do it the way I want to do it. And so, yeah. And I was never like a killer dance technician, like, I don't think I would have gotten into DC. I wasn't that strong. I wasn't that strong of a technician. Like, those people are such super athletes, as are Alvin Ailey, as are most of the high professional companies. And I liked making movement that was more, I don't know, I can't think of quite a word for it, but I probably just wasn't as athletic, but I could dance for a long time. I mean, I did like an hour-long show of dances. So I had a lot of endurance, but I wouldn't say I was like a killer athlete. And I also danced into, like, I was still doing my solos when I was in my early 50s. So I've had a long career.
That's amazing. You got to travel to Dusseldorf and to Amsterdam and to dance. You've danced.
And yeah, I got to tour a lot. And that was fun. It was really fun for me because having a dance company in New York, the other thing I'm not really good at is business. So I have gotten some good grants, but the day-to-day of having enough money to really pay dancers, I never got that. I never figured that out. I paid dancers way too little for how much time it took to make a dance. And then when I went to Europe and I did my one-person show, I would make good money. And like in Germany, every town, and Holland too, I think, had a small theater, so a 100 or 200 seat theater. So I was in an opera in Germany once where I was a dancer in the piece, and that was in a big mega house. But most of them were my solo show in a more intimate space, like 100 to 200 seats. So, it felt like a real good circle of communication with the audience. And because it wasn't based on language, I could could reach across different language barriers. But I also taught a lot when I was there. So often when I toured, I would do a show on Friday night and then do like a 10-hour workshop over the weekend or a 12-hour workshop. So it was real good to make money from my work. And in New York, it was more like I was begging for money to make my work. And that's very stressful. You know, it's just so hard. And there were so many people choreographing and making work. You know, if at the most simple level, I just wanted my work to be stimulating. I wanted people to feel like they had more things to think about from it and be enlivened by it. And I have a lot of humor in my shows. So sometimes, this was funny. I did a few different solo evenings. One of the last one was called Portraits of Women, and they were danced portraits of specific women. So the audience could read, oh, this is about Harriet Tubman. Oh, this is about Marie Antoinette. This is about Rigoberto Menchú and Aung San Suu Kyi. Like, they were people from different cultures. And they were homages, you know, they were meant to honor those people. So, and at the time, cultural misappropriation wasn't a big issue, you know, so I was really trying to honor the people I was dancing about. And one director of a theater said, it's so great to watch a show and know what it's about. So just like what we were saying before, like one dance that I liked a lot was about a woman in the French resistance in World War II. And it was based on research by a colleague at Middlebury College who had gone to study with, she wanted to write about female survivors who had been resistance fighters in World War II. And she went there for 3 months to interview people. And she realized these women are not going to be alive that much longer. She spent 5 years there. And really got to know some of the women. They would take sometimes trips back to concentration camps. Once a year they would do a big train ride. And one woman that she really became friends with, another Fanny Dutay, she taped her telling the story, and she had been an Austrian refugee in Paris during World War II. And she talked about the role of women and how being a woman in the first place was a big disguise because the guys didn't think you would be doing anything. But then Fanny Dutay told her story in French, and I made this dance. I actually made it for a student, but then I kept it because I really liked it as a piece. And so I researched what other women did in the French resistance, and then I kind of free associated, you know, like at one point, this was Fanny Dutay, she was transporting some documents in the back of a Jeep, and she was on the floor of the back of the Jeep, and there were tires up on the seats, so it looked like they were transporting tires. The tires fell on her, and she lost consciousness. And so that was an image that I used in the dance where I'm lying on my side, and I'm in this beautiful coat from the 40s, this kind of tapered long black coat. And when I made the dance, I was teaching at Middlebury College in Vermont, and the lighting guy there came up with this beautiful light design, which was 2 handheld lights with people moving in and out to the dance. And so it created this, you know, 2 shadows from the 2 lights. And so I'm lying on the floor just doing this kind of, you know, sort of exposing my neck, and the lighting people are coming in. So it sort of looks like an interrogation, or, you know, it created a lot of drama around what the dance was, but the dance was a sort of free association in my own mind of the different things that I had read and learned. And then the soundtrack was Fanny Dutay speaking in French, but then the teacher, Paula Schwartz, is saying a translation in English. So the audience can hear what the stories are that this old woman is telling about what she had done when she was in World War II. So anyways, that was one of my favorite, but I think I went on a tangent there. So
that's okay.
Okay.
It really talks about your passion for dance.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Teaching dance. Is there anything that stands out that you're really most proud of in your dancing career? And then I want to find out how you got to Yellow Springs.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, that dance I liked a lot, And there was another dance that I felt very good about,
So
which
you
is
ta-
actually,
you taught that one at the college.
well, I created it on
Created
a
it
student.
at the
Yeah, so sometimes a teacher, like that student was doing her junior project in college, and she asked me would I make a dance for her. And I was already really interested in the work of this fellow teacher on the faculty. And so I thought, oh, this could be a chance. And so I choreographed it on her as the dancer, the student, and then I knew the dance because I made it up. So then I added it to this repertory of portraits of women. And
Is that something that you want in your dance to reflect that the strength of women and the liberation of women, and to remember these important women? Is that important?
yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, they were all honoring those women. And most of them were real people. That one was kind of a composite of what women did. But another one, there was a dance form that I did. So I taught for 4 years at Middlebury College, and when I was there, I took classes with all the other teachers because it was a very interesting faculty. So they were, all the other dance teachers.
Where is this college located?
It's about an hour south of Burlington, Vermont, on Lake Champlain, near Lake Champlain.
Oh, I used to go there for vacations every summer.
Okay.
I know exactly where Lake Champlain is.
Yeah. And Lake Champlain's long, but
So you're saying about the,
this other dance that I liked a lot was called I titled Indictment, and it was in 1991 when the Gulf War started. I had just had my son, so I had this period when I was home for a few weeks.
You and Ira had a son?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
With a new baby, and right then, actually I'm getting mixed up, it was Desert Storm, was that 1991?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that,
The first televised war we would
yes.
Like, 'cause you can look in TV Guide and it'll say Tuesday at 8 o'clock, there's going to be a war and it's going to be on CBS and CNN. That's ridiculous.
And mostly what we saw was the crosshairs and bombs going off at night. And at the time I was doing an improvisational form called Authentic Movement, which was an eyes closed improvisational form that actually came out of dance therapy. And in it, you go in, you close your eyes, you go inside yourself, and you just say, where does my body want to move? And you just listen to your body. Whenever I did that, in that time, this imaginary woman sort of took over. And it was like an Iraqi woman who was losing father, husband, brother, son. She was fictional, but she was very compelling. It's like she would just sort of occupy me. And I think because I saw that war image while I'm holding my newborn little tiny beautiful baby boy, so I was like, it's just such a shocking contrast. Anyways, this dance kind of made itself.
And what's your son's name? You and Ira's son?
Raphael.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And anyway, so that dance just made itself, and then I wound up doing it to music from Tibet, called the Tibetan Singing Bowls of Tibet. But it's on YouTube, actually. I'll show it to you sometime. But
maybe I can link it to your oral history if you like.
Oh, yeah.
What's it called?
Indictment.
Performed by Jill Becker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of my dances are funny. Oh, I started to tell you this before. So I did one dance in a mini skirt and hiking boots and this form-fitting top with great big poofy shoulders. So I felt like I kind of looked like an olive oil character. And it was a medley of funny walks. And I did it in Dusseldorf. And it just was like, some things look real serious, some things look heavy, some things are totally goofball. But I considered it funny, and it had no music except the sound of the clomping of the boots, so it was kind of rhythmically based. And I did it, and it was 7 minutes long, and I came off stage, and nobody clapped, and nobody laughed. And I thought, oh, dear. Oh, dear, this is not good. Well, what I didn't know is in Germany, a dance is usually an hour, not 7 minutes. So you know how in classical music you hear a little piece, you're not supposed to clap in between the sections. So I think it was like that. But afterwards in the cafe, this man came over and he shook my hand and he said, "That was so funny." And I said, "Why did you laugh?" But I mean, I don't even know if I said that, but I thought it because there was not a chuckle in the room, and I'm doing these goofball things. Some were characters I knew and I'd seen on the street in New York. Some were, like it starts, I'm walking on the tiptoes of my hiking boots. You know how they have hard toes, so you can go up on point. And then with my arms and my body like tipped way back. And I don't know, it was just like exaggerated. And some were almost like a junkie falling asleep on the sidewalk, standing up. Well, a lot of my dances were funny, even though I've told you about some of the heavier ones. And like when I just walk down the street, I always feel like just messing around. Just like, what else can happen here? Oh, I could do that with my arm. It's like, I think that's, like if you watch a kid walk down the street, they are dancing. Most little kids are doing some funny little thing with their arms or skipping and I think it's so natural and it gets so drummed out of people. But I feel like lucky that the playful side of movement has been so integrated into my life. And now I teach. I teach dance to people with Parkinson's and Tai Chi for balance. And I just started teaching a dance improv class at the Wellness Center. And everybody can have this fun with their bodies. There's no reason to be bored if you've got a body. You can be doing something you never did before. So I think that's part of my, part of my identity is to be moving. And when I see people do funny little things, I just feel so happy, especially grown-ups. But anybody, it's just fun to see like people sort of liberating themselves. I came to Yellow Springs in 2001, and John Fleming and Louise Smith said that I would really get along with Demi Reber, who was the dance teacher at Antioch College. And they told her about me, and they got her to bring me out to teach summer school for a 5-week intensive course in 2000.
So how did you know John and Louise before?
Yeah, we were friends in New York. We all lived on the Lower East Side, and we had been in shows together, dance theater shows, and John had danced in my dance company for 1 or 2 seasons, and he had done lighting for one of my last dance concert as a dance company. And so Demi, the former dance teacher at the college, brought me out. I taught summer school for 5 weeks. Then she hired me to come out and choreograph a piece. So I did that in January. And then I did my one-woman Portraits of Women show here. And then I had a job interview because she had, in the meanwhile, decided to retire. So they knew me pretty well. And then I applied for her job and got it. And I had applied for a full-time tenure-track teaching job for many years, and I just get these short appointments, but not like the full tenure-track thing that meant you're good for a long time. And then I had stopped applying because I thought this is just not happening. And there are not very many dance teaching jobs for the number of dancers that there are. So anyways, I went ahead and applied for the one at Antioch College, and I got it, and I quickly got tenure because I had been teaching so much over the years. Oh, I liked Yellow Springs. I was comfortable right away. Well, I really like that people are friendly. Just the vibe seems so sweet to me. And I like that people don't just walk past each other or even drive past without saying hello. I like that sort of superficial friendly quality. And I love the friendliness, the convenience that I can walk and see. I could see everything I wanted to see at the college, to go to the movies once a week. There was plenty for me to do, and because I'd traveled so much and lived in such groovy places, I didn't feel like I was longing for that. I felt like I had already had a very full life. In 2005, I met Doug Hinckley, who was a former owner of the Yellow Springs News, and a writer and a creative writer, poet, and we actually did a performance in our backyard where we brought in 50 chairs, and Doug and Ken Simon, who used to live here, and Louise Smith and I made an evening performance, and we did 3 or 4 performances in our backyard and used the backyard doesn't have any trees in it, so it was like an open space, and the deck is kind of like a stage. And sadly, he passed away in 2014. And we met at the Friday night wine tasting at the Emporium. I was actually waiting for someone who was super late, and I shared a table with Doug. And then a few weeks later, he contacted me and he said, could we have a 10-minute date in front of Current Cuisine? And then we met, and he said, so are you single? And I said, I was actually going through a breakup with somebody, and I said, oh, I don't know. But I had just broken up with the person, but it hadn't really sunk in yet, so it was a little bit iffy. And then we wound up just, drinking coffee and dancing at the Emporium, and then a year later we married.
Did you and Ira get divorced, or did you lose him?
Ira and I had already gotten divorced. Okay. But he moved out here to Yellow Springs when I got the job because we had a 10-year-old son, Raphael. But then sadly, Doug, who smoked cigarettes, died of lung cancer in 2014. And and then a couple years later, I met Bill Felker. And so we've been together ever since, and happily so. In the last few years, I've gotten way more involved in politics. So I'm doing stuff at Wright State, trying to let students know that voting yes means voting no to gerrymandering. Because have you seen the language? It's like, it says something like, if you vote this, you are gerrymandering the state, when the whole point is to stop the gerrymandering that's gone on for years and years at this point. And it's not like Democrats do it or Republicans do it. Whoever's in power does it. So, and I think in a way, being older, I'm not raising kids. There's more time to fight for what you care about. Whereas, like, if you're younger and you've got a house full of kids and you got to just pay the bills and get them to sports practice and stuff, you just don't have all that extra time. So I think a lot of people, and a lot of the people, especially women who are in the groups that I'm working on, are of the grandmother age. Yeah, and we have time. Yeah, and passion. So people are willing to do it.
So